This is a podcast from Partnerships for Wellbeing. Well, welcome to Books for a Better Life, a special edition of the Ways to Wellbeing podcast, coming to you in Book Week Scotland and with a live audience here at Waterstones bookshop in Inverness. I'm Grace Nicoll, and along beside me beneath the shelves are two special guests who are going to battle it out to recommend the best books for a better life in 5 different categories. I'll be holding the book jackets and our audience here will decide who wins. So let's meet our guests. The first is a local author, Barbara Henderson. She is twice winner of the Young Quills Award for her books for children, including The Chessman's Thief and a book that I am not going to destroy by pronouncing it, Barbara.
The Siege of Calaverock.
There you go, she did it beautifully. Now, she's also the author of Scottish by Inclination, in which she describes her own and other personal experiences while settling here in Scotland, in her case from Germany. Now, this year she's become the writer in residence for the Forth Bridge. Does that mean that you had to actually climb the bridge for that role?
No, I did get the opportunity to go up, and I am terrified of heights, which, didn't make it easy. I was writing about a boy involved in the building of it at the time, so it was good research, but my heart was in my mouth going into that hoist, you know what I mean, hard hat and everything. But yeah, people looked after me really well. I'm not in a hurry to do it again, but it was exciting to do it. Yes, thank you.
I don't blame you. Now, as an author, do you get the chance to actually read yourself?
I do. I read a lot. I always have a book on the go, and quite often more than one, actually. So it's probably fair to say that I don't sleep quite as much as I maybe should because I get sucked into a book. But I love reading, actually, like Karen, I think. Both pretty enthusiastic readers. And I quite often use the hashtag book-o'clock if I tweet about it, and that's just when I have nothing to say, which is often, then it'll just be another picture of the book I'm reading currently and then just tweeting or Facebooking it out as book o'clock.
Well, good. That's going to help for today. Now, alongside us is another award winner, Karen Bartke, winner of prestigious BBC Audio Drama Award for Best Debut Performance. And Karen has a string of radio and television credits to her name and is probably best known for her performance as Officer Karen in the TV comedy Scot Squad, which I love.
Thank you.
Have you had a run-in with the law yourself, Karen?
I've never been arrested. But I did get pulled over once while I was driving because I was a bit lost and I took a wrong turn in, and then I realised what I'd done, so I went all the way around the roundabout and then carried on, and then my car was really ancient and stalled, and by that point in time the police were like, she's nicked it, she's totally nicked it. So they pulled me over and I was like, I'm so sorry, my granddad left me this car and it stalled at the lights, and they were like, it's fine, you can carry on. And the only other real experience I had was I was walking over the park right next to my house one night and somebody yelled my name really loudly, and I turned round, it was 2 police officers, and I was like, oh my God, what have I done? What's happening? And they were like, love the show, and then just drove away. So that's been my main experiences with the cops.
So you must be quite well known in the police kind of groups.
Yeah, I'm sort of a 9 days wonder. I go to the police college to do training role plays with them. Which I've been doing for donkey's years, long before I was ever in the show, and I'm like a minor celebrity there, and with off-duty police officers in random parts of the country. I was on my friend's stag do in Pitlochry, and twice I got stopped, and one of the guys that I was with is a real police officer, and twice I got stopped, and I was like, I bet you that's a police person. And every time they were either a retired cop, they were a cop on holiday. I was like, see, I told you.
Well, thank you to both of our guests for coming along today. Big round of applause for Karen and Barbara. So confession time for me. I've kind of got out of the reading habit, so I'm hoping that Barbara and Karen here can convince me to turn a new leaf over, or a first page of a brand new book. We're going to have 5 categories of books, and I'll give each of our guests the chance to convince me to come along with their choices and go with them. Now, they'll both have up to 2 minutes to talk about each book, and our timekeeper Jeff will give us a wee audible signal when their time is up. Then it will be over to our audience, who will, by show of hands, vote for their favourite, and will reveal the overall winner at the end of the show. So, Barbara, over to you. You're up first. And the category is fiction that offers comfort or entertainment. So start with the name of your book and the author.
So I'd like to recommend The Edinburgh Skating Club by a lady called Michelle Sloan. I absolutely love this book. If you enjoy Alexander McCall Smith, for example, that sort of gentle, accessible humour of the number one ladies detective agency, or, you know, the Scotland Street type of stuff, I think you will love this. It's a dual narrative, so it's partially set in the modern day where an academic, an art historian, gets a sort of anonymous request to look into who really painted the famous skating minister. And she has to act on her own instincts. They're investigating whether it really is a Rayburn or whether there's something else going on, kind of often disputed. This is an iconic picture in the gallery in Edinburgh. The other one is Enlightenment Edinburgh, the sort of era of David Hume and a very often overlooked lady called Alison Coburn, a poet who plays a large role in this.
How does the dual narrative work?
You know, you sort of skip, you have a modern little segment and then it goes into Enlightenment Edinburgh. They are often slightly connected, but I didn't find it annoying. Sometimes I can get annoyed when I can't lose myself in one narrative and I'm taken out of it, but I really was quite invested in both of them. And I love particularly the humour of Enlightenment Edinburgh and all the cameos of famous people, you know, Robert Burns, you know, Sir Walter Scott, David Hume, loads of people show up in this book and often in quite quirky and funny ways. So I absolutely love this. That's
your time up. Karen, it is over to yourself now. Still, the category is fiction. The name of your book and the author, please.
So I have gone for what I consider to be a stone cold classic, Sir Terry Pratchett's The Hogfather. This is a fantasy novel set on the Discworld world and Mirror of Worlds. The Hogfather is the Discworld's version of Santa Claus in many ways. So this is a book that I always enjoy reading every December in the run up to Christmas. It's about a plot to try to destroy, almost delete, perhaps even cancel the Hogfather. And the only person who can stop it is the anthropomorphic personification of death, who takes the Hogfather's place. I love Terry Pratchett. He's hilarious. He's got so much heart, and it's a beautiful. Sometimes it can be quite pointed and satirical, but it's a really lovely, lovely novel, and it always gets me in the mood for Christmas. It's one of my Christmas traditions.
I do hear of it an awful lot at Christmas. You said the word cancel, which I'm going to kind of dwell on. Mm-hmm. It's like modern day cancel culture, but
it kind of is, but to like a real extreme. So there are characters within this book who want the Hogfather not only to be gone, but to have never existed, which I suppose does reflect on how cancel culture is operating at the moment, with that idea of, I want to go back and destroy any legacy you have as well as what you've done currently. But that makes this sound terribly serious, whereas it's not. There are some genuinely hilarious lines and just beautiful reflections of our own society, and it's just I thoroughly recommend all Sir Terry Pratchett, but this one I think is a really good standalone book. Neil Gaiman said that they both walk the same road, but Sir Terry used to walk in the sunlight because it makes the shadows more pointed, and I think that's a really good description.
There you go. That is your time up. So you've heard two amazing books there suggested. So we're going to go over to our audience, and by show of hand, if you would like to give Barbara's book a go, then please do raise your hand. Okay. And if you would like to give Karen's book a go, please do raise your hands. A lot of hands going up there.
Ouch.
I think we're going to say that Barbara took the one on that one. Well done.
I mean, it's not that I'm competitive, but I hate you.
No.
My husband voted for you.
I did notice that, but I wasn't going to comment. I felt it was charity, but I'll
talk
take
to
it.
him later.
Okay, let's see how round two goes. So our next category is biography. So our guests were asked to select a biography of an inspiring person from history. So Karen, you can go this time first. So tell me the name of your book and the author.
The name of this one is Jim Henson, the Biography by Brian J. Jones. So I'm already out myself as somebody that likes fantasy and childlike things, but I'm quite proud of that. Jim Henson, again, is somebody who's always been tremendously important to me. The Muppet Show was out when I was little, and it was the first album I ever owned, was the Muppet Show album. I love his worldview, and I was fascinated to know more about him as a man because he was so creative and had such a unique way of approaching the world. Obviously, he died tragically very young, and I didn't know that much about his life. I found this to be a really fascinating read. He was a much more complex man, I think, than I expected. His work shows such a beautiful, hopeful, positive view of the world, and I was surprised to find out how much more complex he was as an individual.
Well, that was my question. Like, surely you look, it's the guy from the Muppets. How much deeper did you think it was going to get?
Well, I was always interested to know where his views on the world had come from, and what I found fascinating about him is that he was an immensely driven, very ambitious, quite ruthless in some ways man, but he was a man who nevertheless everybody loved. His marriage broke down, but his wife continued to have a really important part in his life right up until his death, even although he had moved on with other partners and things. There was clearly something about this man that just inspired love and devotion, but he wasn't the nice little fluffy person that you perhaps picture from the work that he created sometimes. And when you look back on his work, he had a lot to say about the world and things that he thought should be better.
Just on the button there. Well done. Okay, so we're going to pass on to Barbara now with a very different book, but still in the same category of biography. Tell me your author and the title of your book.
So I have chosen Maya Angelou, the poet's book, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. It's a classic, which some of you may well have read already. It's been out for a long time. But I love, it's an autobiography. It's a lady writing about her own life. So this is, I wanted to read diverse authors and include a diverse author in my list today. And so Maya Angelou grew up in 1930s America in the Deep South, experienced all that segregation and discrimination firsthand herself, and actually grew up in some ways quite a dysfunctional kind of, her childhood was terribly traumatic in many, many ways. And what really, really jumps from the page is the word resilience. I just think it's unbelievably inspiring how somebody can choose joy out of some really tricky times. She becomes a dancer, a musician, then discovers her voice as a poet. And I just find this utterly inspiring. And it's one that I will never, ever, ever, ever part with.
Did it ever see you looking at your own life and being like, I can power through something that maybe is a bit traumatic for you?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't experienced anything even remotely on the scale of the trauma that she had to endure. But in some ways, it also provides a little glimpse into history. And I'm really into history. I write historical fiction. And, this lady here, it's like a front seat during the civil rights movement and, all that sort of uncertainty. I think we know the outcome of all of that. And we so often don't realise how uncertain that time was and how it really could have gone either way for these people who were staking so much on the outcome of this, to see proper equality. So yeah, I mean, I find it inspiring just to kind of, risk it with activism, make a difference, even though you don't know how it's going to end up. So yeah, in that sense, I suppose, yeah, I love that.
Still talking. She's still talking.
She's not used a full stop yet, so it's fine. It's still a sentence.
Did he blow that thing?
Well, it is now came to our votes. So we have two amazing biographies here. So a raise of hands for Barbara's book. Okay, our audience has voted, and another raise of hands for Karen's book. Even Barbara's voting for Karen's book. Is that allowed? I
think so, because Jim Henson's amazing.
Well, that means it would be a bit of a draw. Yeah, I did think that. The adjudicator has given me the nod, and a draw is. So far it is 2 for Barbara, I'm sure, and 1 for Karen. So we will move on to our next round. It can all change. So our next category is travel. And that is my favourite category. I am one for a travel. I love going away on holiday and seeing new sights. So a book that inspires travel. Barbara, you can go first. So your book title and author, please.
Okay, so I have chosen, sneaked in a children's book, because I'm a children's author and I read a lot of children's fiction. This is The Wolf Wilder by Catherine Rundell. Catherine Rundell, I think, is the best writer writing for children at the moment. She has just had a new book out called The Golden Mole, which is doing brilliantly, and I haven't read it yet, so that is going to be next on my list. But The Wolf Wilder takes us to Russia, a place where at the moment it's probably not so well advised to travel. So it takes you to the remote kind of, tundras of the far east, but the frozen north, these endless steppes, but also then in the second half to St. Petersburg at the time of the Tsars, with the golden roofs and, the colour everywhere, and that sort of, real sense of wonder. Russia being a culture steeped in stories as well. There's a lot of mythology in this, but it's about a girl who rewilds wolves that have been captured and that are then to be set free again. So it's the opposite of taming, really. But there is a sort of supernatural, magical angle to it as well as a goddess story.
So for children, I would imagine that allows them to travel anywhere by reading books like this.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's what reading does. It takes us to places that we want to visit at times when sometimes we might hate where we are. And I think that's a wonderful thing that books can offer us. Yeah. I loved this. I mean, it's one of the only books I've read and then bought again in just a lovelier edition because I love this so much. So it's a brilliant, highly recommended read about Russia.
Oh, just as I was about to ask the last question, right on the buzzer there. Very well done, Barbara. Karen, it is over to yourself for your book and title, please.
So I have gone for Ben Aronovich's Rivers of London. Another fantasy book to an extent, a mixture of a police procedural and a magical fantasy. But it is a book that I read not long before I went down to London to live for a few months. And it's set all around Covent Garden Piazza and the Actors' Church, which is just to the rear of Covent Garden. And having read this book, as I was walking around London, I realised that I was completely seeing the city in a different light. It's called The Rivers of London because there are anthropomorphic personifications, again, I've obviously got a thing for them as well, of some of the rivers in it, including rivers which are now no longer visible in the architecture of London that are underneath the streets. And I found it so inspiring. It inspired me to go into the Actors' Church for the first time, spend time there and enjoy the extreme shift between the crazy touristy Covent Garden Piazza and then just walking around the back of the building next door and suddenly finding myself in this oasis of peace and calm. And it's a really good book to get you into going to London.
So would you find yourself as almost like your own little tour guide with all these different places? And
Absolutely. I found myself walking up a street where I now know that there is a river underneath the street that I didn't know about previously, and I was like, I know it's there and nobody else knows. It felt like a real little secret mystery adventure, and I found myself trailing my hands along the stonework along the side of the Thames, again because I felt such a different kind of connection to London. It became something really magical and exciting, and it's also a really good, funny, sharp, clever, witty, highly plotted police procedural book as well. There's a lot going on in it, so I recommend this because it makes you see London a way you'd never see it otherwise.
Bang on the button again. Right, two very good pitches there, audience. So I'm coming back to you for another vote. So I'd like you to raise your hands if you would like to give Karen's book a go. Okay. And please raise your hands if you'd like to give Barbara's book a go. So I think that is fair to say it's a win for Karen. Yes. Well done. We're doing well with this voting.
Neck
Audience
on
are
neck.
class.
Gosh.
So we have our penultimate category now, a non-fiction book offering advice or information. That might have been a difficult one to pick. I'm sure that they all were difficult to pick. Now, Karen, you get the first shout on this one. Your book, the title and the author, please.
So this book is called The Colour of Time by Dan Jones and Marina Amaral. It shows a new history of the world from 1850 to 1960. It is a book of colourised photos and the accompanying history that goes with them. So Marina Amaral is a photo artist who colourizes historic photographs. So this one really struck me, which is the photograph of the Titanic disaster, where the paper boy's holding Titanic, great loss of life. And there's something about seeing this in colour which makes it so much more immediate and just allows you to imagine being in that situation in a way that black and white photos just don't. Each photograph, there's a huge variety. Some of them are about really huge incidents. Some of them are about really insignificant things. Some of them are really intimate and personal moments. And Dan Jones writes a short history related to all of them to tell you exactly what was happening at that period. So it's just, there's something so... For example, this one here, I'll show you another picture, which is Harold Lloyd, a really, really well-known photograph that everybody's seen of Harold Lloyd hanging off the clock. But seeing him in colour and being able to see, because I don't know if you know this, but Harold Lloyd was missing half his hand due to a bomb that went off.
Makes these real events feel more real.
Yeah, it just makes it feel more immediate and personal and gives you a connection to him that you've never really had otherwise.
So how would they go about colourising this?
So it's a mixture of historical research and artistic vision. So she does tremendous amounts of research into, uniforms and costumes and everything she can find out, and then whatever's left she fills in herself. But it can take hundreds of hours. Some of these photos have hundreds of people in them, and she colorises each person individually, what they're wearing in the background. But
she did very well. Right, so we move on to Barbara. Title and author, please, Barbara.
So my book is On This Day in History, and it's by Dan Snow, who's a well-known television historian. I wanted to buy this because every single day I can look up the date and it'll give me a sort of really fun snippet of what happened on this day in history. And it's so varied and, so random at times. I looked up today earlier on. So on the 15th of November, who knew? On this day in history, in 1492, Christopher Columbus, for the very first time that's recorded, a European mentions the plant that we now know as tobacco. It's the first recorded mention of it. He sent out a bunch of explorers to, explore Cuba, and they came back with mention of this plant. Very, very interesting. Yesterday's, for example, was the anniversary of the first known blood transfusion that was successful, witnessed by Samuel Pepys, no less, in 1666, and it was between two dogs. But how interesting! I just had this picture of this sick feeling Samuel Pepys in the corner, just watching this gory procedure that they were just trying out in case it worked and did something useful. I love that.
Was the first date that you looked up your own birthday when you checked that book? Because it would be mine.
Do you know, it actually wasn't. And you know what? Karen literally sneaked in and looked up her birthday just as we went. And her birthday is the anniversary of the burning down of the Globe Theatre, which is tricky for an actress, isn't it? I didn't look up my birthday. My birthday's still to come. I'm a December girl. I share a birthday with Mary, Queen of Scots, so I wonder if that will be what they mention. But no, I haven't yet. I don't cheat. What's that accusation?
So I take it just changes every regular day you may think to something that would have gone down in history for
Absolutely.
years.
And it's just, I like learning stuff. All right.
Right there. So that was a very difficult one, audience. You've got a tough decision, I think. So I'll let you mull over it quickly. A show of hands for Barbara's book. Even her own hand is up. That's saying a lot. And a show of hands for Karen's book. And round 4 goes to Barbara. It's okay, well, we have a final category. It means that we go to children's book, which is a book that I'm probably sure you'll be able to sell to me, no bother. Perhaps one you'd like to give as a gift for Christmas or whack a fly with on the table, whatever you fancy. So, Barbara, as a children's author, you have to go first. You've got the honour, so you just can't recommend any of your own books.
I wasn't going to. This is one of my absolute favourites. I read this years ago when it won the Chicken House Prize, and it's called called Black Powder by a lady called Ali Sherrick. I'm now friends with this person, but really only because I loved her book so much that I wrote to her and said so and asked her to give me a cover quote for one of my books years later. And she's now one of my pals in the writing world. So this is a book set during the Gunpowder Plot, which I wasn't aware of any children's book set in that time. I love a bit of adventure, me. I like the sort of tension of, clandestine dealings and, high stakes. So this is about a boy called Tom. His father is actually awaiting execution and he has to save his father. But in order to do that, his loyalty is tested to the absolute limit and he gets himself embroiled in this clandestine plot, finds himself in the dungeons beneath the Houses of Parliament and, is at the mercy really of events, but ultimately makes his own decisions. And I really like that when, you take an event that everybody knows about, but find an angle that nobody's thought of before. And she does so brilliantly. So
I wonder if it's easier for children, I suppose, to connect with another child with big events like that. Usually you'd find it as an adult's perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in general, we're hardwired, aren't we, for story. That is how we understand the world. That's how things make sense in our heads. And, this is, I think, a brilliant way to learn about past events, but to find yourself much more caring about the character, who's a fictional character. So highly, highly recommended. Tense adventure all the way through it. And actually a much more uncertain world where children had to make much bigger decisions than maybe they have to do today. And I think for modern kids, it's a brilliant thing to get to do that, to identify with these kids in these situations.
Hey, you're getting good at this. Very good at this.
I'm watching him.
Karen, it is over to you. We've got your title and your author, please.
Yeah, so my book is more of a young adult book. I would say it's for older teenagers, and it's called The Tick and the Talk of the Crocodile Clock by Kenny Boyle. I have to also put my hands up. Kenny Boyle is a friend of mine, so it turns out we both picked books where we know the person. This is a book about a character called Wendy, who is an aspiring writer. She works in a call centre and hates her job, hates her life, gets to know somebody called Kat, and then the story follows them as they become involved in a crime. So it's been posted on the crime table quite a few times in various Waterstones. But it's Wendy is a bit of an unreliable narrator. It's a book that looks at a lot of different things. It looks at mental health. It looks at grief. It looks at finding your place in the world. But it's also, again, it's really funny. It's full of heart, and ultimately it's a book about hope. It's a book about possibility. And I would thoroughly recommend it. I've read it a few times now, and I still really enjoy spending time with this narrator. I love this character and I want to hang out with her.
I would imagine a lot of connotations to Peter Pan and never really grown up, or what it's like to grow up.
Yeah, there's certainly, it is a very, very loose retelling of Peter Pan to an extent. The publishers decided to help that a wee bit by just putting a Tinkerbell all through the book, just in case you hadn't figured that out. It is about Wendy as a character learning what it means to grow up and to move forward and finding her place in the world. And which does make, it is very much the story of Peter Pan about growing up, but it's so beautifully written, and I think it's very delicately done. And I think a lot of people will really enjoy the exploration of how all of these events can impact on people and the possibilities.
Beautifully done.
It was like 2 words.
Well done.
Barely
okay. In our final vote audience, we have 2 final books. So please do raise your hand if you would like to vote for Karen's book. Okie doke. And please raise your hands if you'd like to vote for Barbara's book. Okay, I think Karen takes the win on that category. So before we go to our final scores and find out who our winner is, I would like to ask you both a question. You both have 5 amazing books in front of you. Mm-hmm. Which is your favourite out of the books that you have with you, and which out of your opponent's books would you like to pick as well? So So Barbara, I'll go to you first.
I think if I had to pick one of the books here, it's just been my favourite read this year, and I enjoyed it so much that I just wanted to highly recommend the Edinburgh Skating Club. We lived in Edinburgh for 10 years. A lot of my really formative happenings, happened there. Got married there, had my first child there. I was in and out of the art gallery. I walked around Duddingston Loch. You know what I mean? Like, I had so much personal investment in the place, so that's why I guess I loved the book so much. And out of Karen's book, hands down, it'll be the biography of Jim Henson. I used to be a puppeteer. I worked a good few years as a puppeteer, and I'm now a drama teacher who uses puppetry an awful lot in her work. So yeah, and I grew up with the Muppets. They had this in Germany, guys. They did, and so yeah, it was lovely just to see all these characters here and to rediscover them actually and figure out what they called in English. So there you have it.
So Karen, which of your books is your favourite? Which of Barbara's would you prefer?
So I would have to go for Hogfather. Everything about Sir Terry Pratchett. He's my comfort author. He's the person that I go back to when I want something that will just make me feel content and happy, and he creates a world that makes me a bit happier, because sometimes it's a bit nicer than the one we live in. So I would go for Hogfather. In terms of Barbara's books, it's actually really difficult because all of them are quite appealing. I think I would probably go with Black Powder. That really appeals to me. I love a children's book, and I really like the idea of a historical children's book. It's not something that I've actually read before, so I would probably go Black Powder, I think.
Some very good decisions there, and some great books, and really we're all winners because we've now got 10 amazing books to go and read if we want to. I'm going to go over to find out who the winner is for tonight.
I kind of want to, just before you do, I kind of want to know what one you might read.
What one would I read? Oh, I have to say, big fan of travel, always have, always will be. I am going to London, so I think your book, Karen, with the Rivers of London, just because of the time and the place.
It's not because I'm competitive, I was just curious.
Well, I have to say, at the end of that, it was a final draw, which means that both of you win.
Yay!
Yes.
Put it there.
I don't know why I do that like I'm young.
You both were the best recommenders of best books for a better life. And as I say, we're all winners really, because we've got 10 books to go away and read and enjoy. So thank you to Karen and to Barbara, our producer, timekeeper and kazoo maestro, Jeff Zazinski, and also to our sound engineer, Pete Smith in the corner there, and to everyone here at Waterstones in Inverness, including our lovely wine-soaked audience. I'm Grace Nicoll, and for Books Week of Scotland, and with the support of the Scottish Book Trust and Partnerships for Wellbeing, this has been Books for a Better Life. Thank you so much. Ways to Wellbeing is produced in Inverness, Scotland by Partnerships for Wellbeing, a registered charity. To find out more about our services, go to p4w.org.uk.